Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having me be part of your harvest service. I've really enjoyed it. I was getting a little bit warm during the children's address, I'm not going to lie, but what a precious bunch of young people you have. It's just been lovely to be with you, and thank you so much for your generous support already. I hope that through what I share this morning, you're inspired and encouraged by what this gift is going to do. So as you know, my name is Helen. I live in Belfast. I'm married to Paul and we have 2 boys. And I've had the immense privilege of working with Fields of Life for 12 years now. And it really is a privilege. And this morning I want to share a little bit about what Fields of Life do, but also about the I Am Fed project. And we're just delighted to partner with you. And we're so excited for the many lives that are going to be impacted and transformed through your giving and through your partnership that will be made possible by the White House Presbyterian family. So the next slide shows a little bit about the story of Fields of Life. And as we think of harvest this morning and we think of God's goodness and God's provision, this is a story that really does speak of God's goodness. And it's a story that only God could write. And as we're coming up to our 30th anniversary, it's been incredible to reflect on all that God has done. And in this story, God used the couple in the photo here, Trevor and Ruth Stevenson. And it's a story where they said yes to God's calling. Very briefly, Trevor was from a farming background, but in the early 1990s, he had moved up. He was from Dublin, but he had moved up to Northern Ireland and was a curate in Maherlin Parish. He travelled out to Uganda on invitation to view an agricultural project. And whenever he came home, he found God challenging him that he couldn't forget the images that he had seen, the poverty that he witnessed, and he couldn't get this out of his head. And he came back, he prayed with Ruth, and they felt that God was calling them to do something. They went to their church and had their church's backing, and they felt God calling them to buy land in Uganda to start a farming project. That all sounds very nice and it all fell into place. It was very difficult for them. They faced a lot of challenges, a lot of times where Trevor wanted to say no, but he felt God telling him that this is what he was meant to do. What transpired was Trevor and Ruth moved to Luweero in Uganda to an area known as the Killing Fields following the brutal dictatorship of Idi Amin. And that is where they purchased the land. And Trevor felt God telling him the whole way throughout that God was going to change these killing fields into fields of life, and that's where Fields of Life came from. And that's then, whenever they got the land, the people of the community approached Trevor and said what they really needed for positive change was a school, because they had never gone to school and their children had no hope of going to school. And that's where the vision shifted from agriculture to school. And that was 30 years ago. And the next slide will show, I shared it with the boys and girls, the work of Fields of Life is spread now across 6 countries in East Africa, and that's only thanks to people like yourself supporting the work of Fields of Life generously through financially giving, but also through prayer for us. But our mission remains the same, and our vision is to see children and young people educated and skilled and inspired by faith, hope and love, leading transformation within their communities. And this is a bit of just a snapshot of our work on the ground. At the core of what we do is a desire to serve God and show the love of Jesus. And as Stephen said, we do that through very practical ways, through education, through the provision of clean water, and through providing young people with skills to get out of the cycle of poverty themselves. So it's a hand up rather than a handout. So I'm going to just very briefly share a little bit about some of those key areas. So Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world, and we really believe that. We believe that education is the catalyst for real and lasting change. It's estimated that more than 50% of all out-of-school children are in sub-Saharan Africa, and that was before COVID, which had a devastating effect on many of the areas that we work in. Uganda had one of the longest school closures in the world, with nearly schools closed for 2 years. Can you imagine young people being denied the opportunity to go to school for 2 full years? And the next photo, which I shared with the boys and girls, is very much a typical structure where Fields of Life will partner with a community. And while this looks pretty grim, there's not much going on in this photo that brings hope. The teacher is most likely maybe had a couple of years primary school education rather than being qualified, but is the most educated person in the village. What it does show us is that this community are willing and trying to do what they can to provide an education for their children. And so we partner with the local church and with the community, where we'll come in and build a school. And you'll see that on the next slide, which I shared with the boys and girls. But it's much more to bricks and mortar. It's about making sure that every child has access to a quality education. And to do that, we get alongside the teachers through teacher training, making sure the teachers are well qualified, making sure that children have access to safe, clean drinking water, that they're not having to walk for hours every day, as I shared with the boys and girls, that we're running projects like sustainable feeding programs and I Am Girl, tackling our issues around gender inequality and child protection. But also through our schools, we're able to teach the boys and girls about the love of God, the only one who can truly transform their lives. And so we're able to introduce them to Jesus. And yet, boys and girls can't go to school if they, like I said before, are walking long distances every day to collect water, or if they're collecting water that is dirty and they are sick and falling seriously ill. Sadly today, as we come here together and share, 1 in 3 people globally do not have access to a safe water supply. And this is Rachel. Rachel gets up at 5 a.m. every day and she walks 3 miles through the long grass with her baby daughter to the dirty stream. Rachel says, "We walk frightened through the deserted bushes that lead to the water. I have heard stories of children being bitten by snakes and women being attacked while walking to get water, and this scares me." Her biggest fear, though, is not those things, but it's that she'll lose one of her children to a waterborne illness one day. And what's worse is that Rachel will need to do this journey all over again later on that day, and then get up the following day at 5 a.m. and do it all over again. And sadly, on the next slide, collecting water is seen as women's work, and so this arduous task falls to women and young girls daily. Women spend 40 billion hours every year walking to get water. And the average distance, as I shared, is 3 miles. Very often it's through remote bush, through long grass, as Rachel shared. It's early in the evening or early in the morning or late in the evening when the sun is low. They're at risk of attack on that journey. It covers many miles through difficult terrain. There's animals sharing the same water source. There's cattle in the water. They have to navigate down to the river edge or the stream to fill their 20 litres of jerry can. As I shared with the boys and girls, that's the equivalent of 20 kilograms. And then they start the long journey home. The reality is that they're gone for many hours to do this difficult journey, but when they get home, they're subject to domestic violence because they've been gone for so many hours. And also for young girls who are at risk of the same attack, but they're also missing those vital school hours that can change their lives. And so Fields of Life in 2010 purchased their own drilling rigs, which you'll see in the next slide, the photo, purchased their own drilling rigs and trained up our own drilling team, and we call our drillers our heroes. They spend months at a time away from their families, just going village to village, drilling for water, which is often 50 metres below people, but they just have no means to access it. And providing a borehole in a community, it's life-changing. Not only does it give clean water, which is a basic human right, but you reduce illness and death. You allow children to go to school. You allow women to earn income to provide for their families. You reduce the risk of assault on young girls and women. And also, before any drilling starts in a community, our drillers share the word of God with the community. They pray over them and they distribute Bibles. So while on a very practical level, our team are bringing clean water, a basic human need, to people, they're also sharing about the water for life, about Jesus Christ. And you can see the difference, and in the bottles that I shared earlier, this is the difference of people between drinking dirty water and having access to clean water. And one of the final aspects of our work is I Am Girl. And this is a really vital programme that has become so much more important during COVID, when girls became even more vulnerable. And globally, on the next slide, there's some stats. 132 million girls are out of school, with 16 million girls never expected to enter school. And again, this was before COVID, which has had devastating consequences. The reality around these frightening statistics comes down to menstruation. It's stigmatised, there's lack of education for these young girls. there's lack of hygiene management, they don't have access to products, they are teased and bullied, they don't have washrooms at their school where they can look after themselves in a hygienic way, and therefore they end up missing 1 week of school every month, and that equates to 20% of their school year. So when it comes to exam times, they naturally fail their exams and they're forced to drop out of school. If a young girl is forced to drop out of school at the age of 12, 13, she'll most likely be forced into marriage and to become a mother while she's a child herself. This next slide shows Patience. Sorry, the next one. And Patience attends a school in Uganda. Patience shared, "School wasn't safe for young girls like me, and it was very difficult to manage my period. There was no private space I could go to the toilet and clean myself. I often had to miss school due to the shame." So Patience's school didn't have a girls' bathroom or any latrines. The latrine doors were falling off and there was no privacy for her and her friends. She shared that she would often go to the bush rather than go to the toilet at school, and very often just miss school completely and stay at home. But I Am Girl was rolled out in her school, and the girls received a toilet and a washroom for them to use, and they learned how to make reusable sanitary pads so they had adequate products to help them manage their menstruation. And she said, "Thanks to I Am Girl, I haven't had to miss school due to my period. I am performing very well in my studies, and most of all, I am not ashamed." And that picture is Patience outside the new washroom, which I love, just the hope that that picture speaks of. So on the next slide, we want to ensure that through I Am Girl, that all girls are empowered to complete their education and grow into strong, healthy young women, and that their children, when they are ready to have children themselves, have the same opportunities. So that's really about what Fields of Life is about, very briefly. But again, like I said, that is only possible thanks to the incredible support of people like yourselves. We hear these harrowing stories all the time, but in the midst of them we get these inspiring stories like Patience, whose life has been changed, and that is only possible whenever people come alongside us. So I want to share a little bit with you about Thrive and Thrive Northern Uganda. Northern Uganda is an area that has suffered a horrendous past. It suffered a 20-year conflict from the mid-1980s. It was known and described as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed by a rebel group. 25,000 young children were abducted and 2 million people displaced. And today we risk a lost generation who have lost out on an education. So it's an area in real need of development and restoration. And this is where St. Stephen's School, Masalaba, is located in Gulu in northern Uganda. And that is why we're so thrilled that White House Presbyterian have committed to partnering with this community as part of Thrive Northern Uganda. So Thrive, what is it? Thrive Northern Uganda includes 7 schools, of which St. Stephen's Masalaba is one. And we believe that for children to really thrive, they need to be able to say, "I am fed, I am educated, I am safe, and I am loved." And that when that happens, they will be able to transform their lives and their communities. A child can't thrive if they are not educated, if they don't have qualified teachers, and teachers who don't feel valued, if they don't have adequate school resources and learning materials. Boys and girls, but particularly girls, can't thrive if the place they go to school, they don't feel safe. If they can't attend every week of the month rather than just 3, if there aren't clean latrines and washrooms, if they're not protected and nurtured, and if they don't have safe classrooms and facilities. We want children to go to school to know that they are loved by our Father, and we want to teach them about His unconditional love. And with I Am Fed, which White House Presbyterian have committed to, children cannot thrive if they are going to school and they don't have access to clean water, or if they're going to school and they haven't eaten since maybe 5 a.m. that morning and they can't concentrate. And that's what Thrive's all about. We want to ensure that every child can say, "I am educated, loved, safe, and fed." And as we read in Scripture from Psalm 104, at harvest time we give thanks for all that God has provided for us and all that He has given us. And in this psalm, we read about the wonder and the beauty of creation. This psalm is filled with beautiful imagery, where the birds nest, where the mountain goats live, the skill of a lion as it hunts its prey, and the vast array of living creatures in the water. All things in this psalm point to the Creator, the one true God. The chapter begins with, "Praise the Lord, my soul." It is a call to worship God in spirit and truth. And throughout, in verse 2, we read, "The Lord wraps himself in light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a tent." God's honour and majesty is just as apparent as a person's clothing, and so is the light-like purity of his being. The power of God is seen further in his ability to stretch out the starry skies like a tent curtain. In verses 3 and 4 we read, "And lay the beams of his upper chambers on their waters. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. He makes winds his messengers." The Lord also created and sustains his heavenly abode, which verse 3 refers to as his upper chambers. The waters are another way of pointing to lofty rain clouds. This picture is one of the Lord laying out the beams of his heavenly palace in the sky. So awesome is the Creator that he makes the clouds his chariot, and he rides along the wings of the wind. The psalmist understands in this that God is the Creator of all things, that it is God who laid the foundations of the earth. Nothing happened by chance, nothing came about randomly, but the Creator is behind all things. And what God built, he built well. The earth's foundations are solid and will not be moved until God moves them himself. We read about how God provides through nature, provides for plants, for animals, and for us. In verse 13, we read, "The land is satisfied by the fruit of his work." The psalmist considered how the water, plants, and animals of the earth find their place in God's plan and in his order. The wild donkeys drink their water, the birds have a home so they may sing among the branches. The psalmist saw a good, harmonious world in nature and knew that our God, our Creator, was responsible for it. We continue on into verses 14 to 18 on how nature and how God provides for animal and man. God designed the ecology of the world so that with work, man may bring forth food. Under God's blessing and man's work, the food brought forth is wonderful. And towards the end of the verses we shared, he turns his attention to the moon and the sun. They operate according to God's plan, his perfect plan, providing darkness so that all beasts of the forest can prowl. And just as God provided night, he provided day. Verse 22 through 23, "The sun rises and they steal away, they return and lie down in their dens. Then people go out to their work, to their labour until evening. When the lions sleep, people go to their work until evening," all operating according to God's wise plan for creation. And again, none was brought about by chance or a random sequence of events, but the wise works of a wise and great God. The psalmist worships God for his goodness and his creation. Yet as we reflect this harvest of all the beauty of God's creation, and we give thanks for all our provision and the abundant blessings we have, it's hard to not struggle with what we've seen in the slides and the stories shared, that there's an imbalance when we look at the incredible earth that God created, yet what our brothers and sisters have thousands of miles away. It's probably 2 slides on. This is Noreen. She has 4 siblings. She is the only child in her family to go to school, and the only reason she can go to school is because she has a sponsor here that supports her to do so. Her mother can't afford to send her other 4 children. Unfortunately, Noreen's family, her mother does not own any land for cultivation, but she had been surviving on a hard piece of land where she could grow some food for her family. Since the COVID pandemic, she's been struggling to get by and provide. This year, things have got much worse. Since October last year, she waited for the rains to come and they never came, and harvest after harvest has failed. They're struggling to find food and have used all the seeds they had stored. Her mother had to look for work in the community to be able to earn some money to provide for her children. And she's been able to provide 1 meal every day. They eat at 5 p.m. and that's all they have enough for. The impact of the war in Europe has led to soaring food prices across Uganda, with the cost of flour and rice trebling. The money she earns is so little to afford a full meal because of the food crisis, but she is thankful that she is even able to afford 1 meal to feed her children. And she fears every day what will happen. And we're seeing the impact of cost of living here. Every conversation is filled with the price of fuel and the price of food and what the next bill is coming. And we're seeing that here in a very real way. But as we so often see, it's those already living in poverty that are being affected the most, and it's the most vulnerable who suffer the most. And so this harvest, we are reminded of our brothers and sisters who are hit first and worst by some of the biggest challenges impacting our world today. And that's why we're so thankful to White House Presbyterian for standing in the gap for St. Stephen's Primary School, Masalaba. Through your partnership, we're going to be able to roll out an I Am Fed programme. There are 486 boys and girls attending St. Stephen's, Masalaba. 486 boys and girls who will get up at a ridiculous hour tomorrow morning compared to our children here to get ready to walk the distance to go to school to start at 7 a.m. But that's 486 boys and girls who will be changed and transformed, and their families also changed and transformed through this partnership. So next slide. As I mentioned earlier, I Am Fed. This is a photo of St. Stephen's. There's some of the boys and girls in their lovely smart uniforms. And then the next slide, as I said, we partner with the local church in Uganda whenever we commit to a project. So St. Stephen's was built in 2015. So next slide, as I said, I Am Fed is integral to children surviving. When children receive a meal and have clean water, they're healthier, they concentrate in class, and are more likely to come to school every day. Through I Am Fed, we want to give sustainable tools to families in this area so that they can grow their own food and provide for themselves. That includes agricultural training, and these are also skills that children can take home to their families. In one school, Nyapaya, which is actually in the same area, the same district as St. Stephen's, Nyapaya, we've been equipping and encouraging a sustainable feeding programme. We've educated the teachers, the pupils and the parents on agriculture and the benefits of a balanced, healthy diet. Land was purchased for the school, and they now have room to grow a variety of crops, including maize, cassava and other vegetables. And we're also working with the school to make sure that addressing areas like climate change, how to protect their crops whenever the rains don't come. And this allows the school to continue feeding the children without need of charity, allowing the children to concentrate in class and thrive. And the next slide is just a quote from Madam Margaret at Nyapaya. He said, "The provision of midday meals is an excellent idea as it improves performance of children and activeness in class, concentration and their attendance. It also increases enrolment. From the agricultural inputs provided for us, we are able to grow and harvest maize, cassava and sweet potatoes. Growing our own food has helped us to have a balanced diet because we are able to grow vegetables alongside the staple foods, and in future we want to even grow fruits." So thank you to everyone within White House Presbyterian. We're so excited to see this project that has gone so well at Nyapaya be rolled out at St. Stephen's, Masalaba. Thank you for standing with this community and with the church at St. Stephen's. We're excited to partner with you, and we really believe that this support is going to impact these children and their families in a very real and meaningful way, in a way that is sustainable, that will provide them with the tools to be able to provide for themselves, for the school, to provide meals for the children, but also that these skills get brought home to the family so the family can provide food for their own children. And we really believe that this is going to help them break out of the cycle, to give dignity and to bring hope. So thank you. As I said, that is only possible through your giving. And I really do look forward over the next while to sharing stories on the progress of the project with you. And I really hope that it is encouraging for you. And I look forward to sharing lots of those stories from 486 boys and girls who are going to be able to say, I am fed. And so in closing, as we read earlier in Scripture, the greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbour. And we want to be Jesus' feet and hands. As we read throughout the Bible, Jesus spent his time with the poor, the needy, the afflicted. His heart was with them and for them. And we want to respond to this life by doing what we can to serve him and share those who are struggling. So as I close, thank you again for showing love to a community thousands of miles away, which you may never get to meet in person, but we really believe that these valuable skills are going to change lives, transform communities, and build hope. And we're so excited to be on the journey with you. So thank you so much, everybody.